Well, good morning, everybody. We're just coming up to 10 o'clock now. Hope you can hear me. So we do have people who are still arriving, so I'm going to mute myself for a couple of minutes just to give other people a chance to get in on the act, and then we'll make a start. So just bear with us for a couple of minutes, and I'll be right back with you. Thank you. Okay, everybody. We have had a few more joiners in those couple of minutes, so thank you for doing that, and welcome everybody to the latest Sigma webinar. This time we've got an interesting set of topics, really. It was quite a difficult one to put together, but it was kind of inspired by some recent client difficulties that, well, there were the client's difficulties, but this gives a bit of context behind it and points the way forward to a means of dealing with some of the problems that the entire world, is facing at the moment. So I've entitled this presentation, Change Management, Climate and Geopolitical Change. And you're going to hear me say the word change an awful lot over the next 40 minutes or so. I'll start off by introducing myself. My name is Mark Bunch, and I'm a Senior Process Safety Consultant with Sigma-HSE. I've been with the company on and off, shall we say, for a little while now, but I'm essentially a process safety specialist, and I've been doing this since the late 1990s. When in the UK the COMA legislation was first introduced, we did some of the first COMA reports. So once you get in process safety, it's very, very difficult to get out. So I've tried to stick with it, and these webinars are fun and a good way of getting knowledge out there. So I hope you enjoy it. I shall start off, if my computer works. Well, there we go. My computer does work, but it's slow. I'll start off with a little bit of an introduction, first of all, to what Sigma-HSE is and the kind of things that it gets involved with. And then I've split the rest of the talk up into some of the issues around climate change, some of the issues around geopolitical change. And then the last little section is intended to just tie that together with change management systems. So I'm sure that all your organizations will have a management of change procedure and set of systems to go with it. And usually when I ask people what they're like, they say they're horrible. They don't like dealing with them at all. And I agree and point out that that's probably the way that they're supposed to operate. But we'll say more about that towards the end of the talk. So that's the four main sections. I'll start off with the introduction to Sigma. We are a group of companies headquartered in the UK, and we provide technical services mainly on the health, safety and environment side of things to energy and chemicals and companies in industry. We have representation in India, we have it in the UK, in our headquarters down in Winchester, and we have an office out in the States as well, which I hope to go to one day. We are, well, the three main points here is that we've got engineers, scientists and chemists. If you've been on my webinars before, you'll know that I'm very down on chemists, but really I like them enormously. We're all professionals, and we do actually sit on standards committees as well, so it's not as if we operate in a vacuum. We've got our fingers in a great many pies as a result. Diverse sectors: food, chemicals, oil and gas, etc. And we have significantly, I think, good resources in that we have a fire explosion testing laboratory. Down in Winchester, we do electrostatics analysis, analytical laboratories there also. And just to give you a little bit of assurance that we know what we're doing, we are working under the appropriate quality accreditation for that as well. So if you do have any testing to do, we'll be very happy to take those samples off your hands. Yes, so consultancy is one branch of what we do. On the process safety side, testing is the other. We also provide training. The webinar is one way of doing it. I always feel a little weird sort of talking to the computer a lot. I much prefer the face-to-face stuff, but it is a modern world, isn't it? We're all working off the internet, so it's a very good way of getting information out there quickly to people. Our consultancy services, we do industrial fire and explosion hazards, the electrostatics I mentioned. Very importantly, and up at the forefront of managing process safety correctly, is the risk assessment. It goes up front. If you don't know what you have, you don't know what's going to hurt you. So those are very, very important to us, and we're extremely good at those. Functional safety we do as well. Environmental services, and if you need bespoke training or training on any of those particular aspects, then we're very happy to provide that as well. It'll probably be me doing it as well, so that's all to look forward to. I want to say a little bit about testing services that we provide, because it's going to link in to what I'm going to talk about for the rest of the session. So DESIR has been a focus of ours for some time. Hence the excellent laboratories that we run. We'll tell you what the flammable, the explosive properties of your materials are, and it's a really important thing to do. As I said, if you don't understand the hazard, you're not in a position to do anything about it, and you are in breach of the law at the same time. So these kind of things are necessary and a very good thing to do, but it should, I hope, tie into a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So that's an introduction to Sigma. This next section I've called Change Management in a World of Change. And change is around us at the moment, at least, all the time. Change begets change. And that's very much the problem. If you have changes in world events, as we're witnessing at the moment, what with wars, pandemics, and globalization, contraction of some industries, the fact that China produces, or the Asian Rim, Southeast Asian Rim, produces about 75% of supply chain activities. Any disruption to those has real-world effects further down the stream than you might care to realize. And this hit one of our clients recently when they were forced to change supplier. And they were forced to change supplier because it was a supply chain issue at the time. A particular route was unavailable to them. And the supplier that they went to was able to give them exactly the same compound that they were looking for. But there were slight differences, and slight differences occurred in the particle size of the solid. The solid was a combustible solid, and they had a small incident as a result, because the flammable properties of that solid had been changed. In only a very slight way, but enough to change the nature of the hazard. This hadn't gone through any change management procedure, as far as I'm aware. So they missed that possibility. And the point, I suppose, the point of the entire morning is to explain how geopolitical, climate change, things like that, can have real-world practical implications to your basis of safety, for how well you operate your plant, and how whether you control your risks to as low as reasonably practicable. So the two main changes that we're, or challenges even, that we're facing at the moment are climate change and geopolitical change. As far as climate is concerned, we've had recently, in the UK at least, a proposal under the name of net zero, which is really quite a stringent and far-reaching change to the way that the UK intends to conduct its business going forward. That's going to make a change in the legislation that we face in the UK. It's going to make a change to the transport. It's certainly going to have economic ramifications in terms of prices, but also external costs such as levies that are going to be imposed on companies. And critically, the energy that is used to produce materials and products, that is going to undergo some change as well. Where we get our energy from is going to be the main focus. As far as geopolitical events are concerned, we have one at the moment, a significant one, and one that is hard to predict, and the ramifications of which are even harder to predict as well. And that's the conflict in Ukraine at the moment. That also leads to changes in legislation, whether you can deal with certain parties. All sorts of laws come into effect about who you can trade with. Transport routes may be closed. In particular, if you think about China and that Southeast Asian water enclosed, where everything goes out by ship, a maritime conflict out there would seriously impact the ability of the rest of the world to do business. Again, economic effects and energy also. Where do we get a lot of our gas from, for example, becomes a pressing issue. So the way we're going to approach this today, at least, is I'm going to take you through the climate and the geopolitical changes and how to do the risk assessment associated with those, the necessary analysis of the situation as best we can understand it, an estimation of how significant it is, what the consequences of that are, how likely it is to happen. And this is where the real lack of specificity, the difficulty in predicting things is important, and perhaps give you some pointers as to what you can do. I want to make sure that you at least get something out of this that is of practical use to you as well. Those changes that are the result of your risk assessment need to be managed. And that's the last bit of the talk when I'm going to talk about managing those changes in the context of DZIA. You make a change as a result of wider events, that has implications for whether you are operating safely or not as a result, in excess of the necessary business of making a profit at the end of the day. So I mentioned the net zero targets, which were set by the UK. In the UK, we have an organisation called the Chemical Industries Association. Steve Elliott is its chief executive, and they are fully in support of it. They see it as essential part of managing climate change risk. So there is buy-in, at least from industry representatives, on climate. To give you some context, weather is one thing, climate is another, but weather records are being set more frequently. What used to be a 1 in 100 year event is now a 1 in 10 year event. So periodically we're seeing high temperatures, heavy rainfall, those kind of things that are continually setting new records. The projections are that we experience this ongoing increase in temperature until the middle of the next century. And the severity of those extremes is also projected to increase with global warming as well. Hotter summers, drier than earlier estimates, and winter weather is projected to be more severe. More hurricanes, those kind of things, more heavy rainfall. So it's not terribly good news on climate as far as the projections. So there is going to be revised legislation, and we will have a revised Environmental Act. And the 2021 Act has now received royal assent, which means it is going to be implemented. And one of the main things is it will potentially impact water supply to some industrial sites. The water sector has a legal requirement now to have a supply resilience plan in place. So this is additional work that companies have to do. There is potential impact on the availability of water for sites during these times of extreme temperatures and drought, and you're going to have to factor this into your risk assessment going forward. So it is additional work that companies are required to do under the legislation. Because there are implications for the chemical and energy sectors, and because you are essentially more vulnerable than most, you need a comprehensive risk assessment to do that. And it has to be based on up-to-date climate change data. And this is one of the difficulties in that data changes rapidly as forecasting becomes more accurate, and it is informed by more relevant data. So more up-to-date data comes in, they change the models, that changes the predictions. So it becomes difficult to prioritize. You need to evaluate what the consequences to a site might be and have in place an action plan to mitigate those consequences. The reason is that you're very reliant on these things, utilities, drainage, and the water supply as well. You've got high quantities of hazardous materials that could lead to a breach of containment. It could lead to damage to your on-site infrastructure. And where your industry is globalized, you're exposed to a wider range of effects internationally, simply because you've got more places that can be hurt, places that are more vulnerable just by virtue of where they are in the world. They can cause disruption to your supply chains, international and domestic. Could be other reasons as well, of course, related to the climate, but political reasons or other force majeure events in the raw material supply or product distribution. This is why our clients have to go to another supplier as a result. Has implications for the emergency services. They go out to all sorts of events, not only for you, but it increases the likelihood of flooding, wildfires, and so on. And the availability of water may be affected as well. So I said that weather was different for climate, although linked, and that's this last bit here, long and short-term considerations. Those events that occur as individual extremes of weather within the wider context of more likelihood of these events happening in the first place. So there is a long and a short-term view to be taken about how best to manage these kind of risks. There is some good guidance, however. So this is a useful thing for you to have a look at, the ISO 14091 document. It's an adaptation to climate change guidelines. So it will provide you with guidelines on things like your vulnerability, the impact that climate change can have, and the risk assessment process itself. It it gives you chapter and verse essentially on how to develop and implement a sound risk assessment for climate change. The broad scope of the document is to give you a list of broad objectives. First of all, to avoid major accidents. This is where the basis of safety is important. Once again, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep this plant safe and still making money at the end of the day. And those are these second ones: how to maintain your business continuity in the face of these risks, and how to maintain productivity as well. It's the bottom line that you're after preserving. But always these should be aligned with your overall business plan. If your business plan is to grow, those three things, avoidance of accidents, continuity and productivity, have to fit in with that overall business plan as well. And that's an added complication. Whatever plan you put in place must be resourced. And that means senior management have to have some buy-in, because they are the people who are going to be supplying the time, the money, the people, and any other resources that are required. So they have to be able to commit those within that overall business plan. You need to gather the information on how your business currently manages, whether there is business continuity, and has it affected you in the past in any way. That will help you to understand whether you've got any enhanced risks and highlight any additional vulnerabilities that you might have as well. So there is a couple of other guidance information documents as well. Two that I've cited here are the UK government's climate risk assessment. That goes back to 2017, so it is a little older now. And then the IPCC sixth assessment report. So these are put out fairly regularly, but there are some good fact sheets, and those are region specific as well, describing the main impact. So you'll be able to reference those in order to see whether there are any particular scenarios which give you, as you operate, more cause for pausing. A risk assessment is a risk assessment. It is essentially the same set of it's the same thing you do no matter what your risk assessing is like. You need to identify what the potential impacts are. A brainstorming exercise is a good way of doing it. If you use prompts, that helps to keep your consistency. The use of past experience is cited here, but past experience is one thing, but because we're dealing with change at the moment, and change in an unprecedented, rapid fashion, past experience might not be relevant, may indeed steer you down the wrong path as well. So use that with a little bit of intelligence as well. So what we're aiming for is a long list without, at the moment, prioritizing. For your operations, you need to consider whether your processing is affected by ambient conditions, high temperatures and so on, whether additional materials on site could be affected by extremes of temperature, and what the effects might be for operators as well. Things may be made more dangerous, in other words. For your assets, any of your buildings, your plant, etc., any of those that could be damaged by ambient conditions, heavy rainfall, and so on. Markets and finance. So we need to assess the risks associated with changes on customer demand and supplier availability as well. And again, this ties into my clients' difficulties. Insurance requirements, investor requirements, and other third-party interests, for example, your neighbours, etc. If you're having flooding and it goes onto your neighbour's land, it is a problem for them, and it is a problem for you as well. We prioritise based on the outcome of that risk assessment, and we assign a priority based on whether the risk is high, medium, or low. And the risk, of course, is this combination of how bad things can be, the consequence, and what the likelihood is of it happening. And that's a key thing within risk assessment. Two are different. You can have a high consequence but a low likelihood, giving you a low residual risk, or a high consequence and a high likelihood, which will give you a higher residual risk. It is the risk that we're aiming to minimize, either by consequence or by likelihood. And this is where it's difficult, especially with climate. It's where the likelihood is difficult to estimate. A 1 in 1,000 year event may occur now every 100 years. A 10-fold increase in frequency, that's an order of magnitude. So whatever estimates you use need to be updated regularly. As we have more data, we get a better feel for how often these things are going to happen. As far as the consequences is concerned, we need to consider its impact on safety, on the environment, on your commercial costs, whether you've got a viable business, and those broad objectives that we previously defined, productivity and business continuity as well. Once you've got an indication of where your priorities are going to lie, you're in a position to be able to do something about it. And what you do about it is achieved through the adoption of a plan. Identifying what it is you need to do, these what we call resilience options. You need to evaluate those. You need to select which is your preferred measure and then put those into a formal plan for executing that plan. Now there is a useful little exercise, this plan, do, check and act. You plan to do something, you do it, you check that it's working, and then you take additional actions depending on the outcome of that check. And that's particularly useful in this context because things are changing on such a rapid basis. And that's the checking bit of that plan, do, check and act. So build that into your system for managing the risk. It will make your lives easier in the future. So there's questions to ask yourselves on resilience measures. We're improving resilience generally by targeting the business consequences of incidents, whether there's a disruption to the business itself, to the way you operate, to the cost, or to your reputation. What information do you need? What awareness, what skills would improve your resilience in order to mitigate your priority risks? Are there any operational changes that you can make to your priority risks? Could you use, for example, a different compound within your process in order to minimize the potential for an incident? Can you make some physical changes or technological changes? And if you read the government's report, it's the technology that they're putting a lot of store in. Changes in technology as it improves over time is going to be a mitigating factor in climate change. And what about strategic responses? Can we relocate? Can we develop a new product entirely? New markets are created all the time, or sharing the risk across a number of partners. All sorts of resilience measures that could be put in place. Which ones you adopt should be based on things like if they're going to do any good, how effective they are, and the cost versus benefit. And those two you really need to think of together, because if you implement 10 small changes that together add up to a certain cost, you might get one major change for the same cost, but you can only do one of those two options. So spend a little bit of time thinking about what approach is best, where best to spend your money so that you're getting best value for money, producing the best risk reduction for the amount that you do have to spend. Flexibility is important because, as I said, the nature of the data is changing all the time. We're getting better at it. So future accommodation is a useful thing to build in as early as possible. The earlier you get that capability in place, the less pain you'll suffer later on. And its practicality of use within given timescales. And that's just a matter of saying, when are the benefits going to be realized? Is this something we have to wait 20 years for before we see it? Is the damage already done by that time? So again, a certain amount of intelligence and analysis is going to be needed in order to do that. Making and implementing the effective plan, we need to state what it is we're going to do before, during and after an event. Have somebody who is responsible named a means of monitoring and reviewing that plan to accommodate the change, again, because the data changes over time, and ideally align it with other improvement plans. So if you can align your improvement, for example, your scheduled replacement of equipment with this plan, you'll save again some time and money in doing that. Just bear with me 2 seconds. I'm just going to take a drink of water. That's better, thank you. And monitoring and review. So this is part of the UK. Certainly we have this commitment to ongoing continual improvement, and the monitoring and review of this is that check of the plan, do, check and act cycle that I mentioned. So that covers monitoring the weather impacts and the effectiveness of the measures that you put in place, whether they're doing the job that you expect them to do, exercising that plan and reviewing it regularly to make sure that it is consistent with the data that's been generated by external agencies and consistent with the data that you are discovering on the effectiveness of those measures as you install. Test your measures and plans for dealing with incidents, and based on the outcomes of those plans, you update them as a result. That's how you do that monitoring and review. So that's saying the same thing. Okay. So climate change is one thing. We are going through this evolving situation elsewhere in the world. We've just had the pandemic as well, which showed up things like severe gaps in our supply chain resilience. So there are added complications. The risk assessment side of this is exactly the same. You're looking for what it is that can hurt you, what measures you've got in place to prevent them from hurting you, and therefore where the gaps are, what it is extra that you have to do in order to mitigate those risks. So the added complications for geopolitical change are, first of all, its speed. That tends to make an organization's responses reactive rather than proactive. And the other thing that we need to think about is sometimes these changes are reversed almost as quickly as they start. So a certain amount of flexibility is required as well. The nature of the change is different, whether it's supply chain, energy, infrastructure, your customer base, transport phenomena, etc. It's an extensive list. Knock-on effects. The loss of a customer could lead to your site being unable to offload what they would normally have sold to this customer. So it's not your fault, it's not a direct effect on you, but things that happen to other people can have an effect through this sort of linkage, this butterfly effect. You may have operations in areas of the world who are undergoing significant rapid change. That might mean they don't get raw materials, they don't get the opportunity to remove product. They may be in danger of being bombed or having transport routes to them cut off. These kind of things need to be assessed as well. There must be this balance of short and long-term strategies, so that if you predict that a particular situation is going in one direction, you may be in a position to exploit the result afterwards and therefore enhance your business. And also the way that other people respond to the change as well. So it's not just your response that you're trying to define and predict, but it's how other entities are also going to respond to a given change as well. So I suppose a good example would be the way that governments put trade embargoes on countries with whom they disapprove or have some kind of argument. It has an effect on your trade. Right. So all these things are added complications that are so difficult to predict. So a couple of examples. Ukraine is one. Ukraine was wanting to head towards democracy, and Russia said niet. And Kazakhstan, which was heading towards totalitarianism, and the two that we've got going at the moment. But this means supply chain disruption. In particular, the ones that we've come up with: uranium, corn, wheat, metals, natural gas, and of course oil. Another potential we've got 3/4 of the world's manufacturing supply chain steps around China, around Taiwan. And ocean transport, therefore, would be severely affected if there were to be some form of maritime war or embargo within that area. It's this. We have a trend at the moment, and it's a very quick one. It was probably going to take place over the next 10 years, but we're looking at this taking place much more quickly now. And it's the tendency to reduce the independencies. That was originally so globalization and dependencies between countries were opposition to that was originally by trade, labor, and populist resistance. But now, of course, we have governments getting in on the act, and it's from this national security position. We have inklings that this is occurring at the moment because of China's COVID policy at the moment. China's vaccine was not as effective as it has been in the rest of the world, and they are again relying on lockdowns and house arrest and all the rest of it, giving us supply chain problems elsewhere in the world. So it is this unpredictability that make your risk assessment much more difficult to achieve. When we calculate risk, we look at the consequence, we look at the frequency. If your estimate of the frequency is so poor, sometimes it can be detrimental to understanding the situation. It gives you poor information as a result because you are unable to prioritize. And the consequences too can be difficult to estimate because of these knock-on effects and the interconnectedness between the positions in third parties. So for your supply chain, the risks are both external and internal. Demand risks are things when, for example, you miscalculate product demand, often as the result of a lack of insight into year-on-year purchasing trends or, for example, unexpected high demand. Supply risks, those are when raw materials for your business that your business relies on, you don't get them in time. Disruption to the flow of product, to the flow of material, and to, or even just the parts of that as well, that can severely impact your supply chain. Environmental risks as the result of socioeconomic, political, governmental, or other environmental issues. And business risks as well. Unexpected changes, for example, when one of your entities on whom you depend, one of your third parties, is unable to fulfill. For internal risk, we have manufacturing risks, we have business risks, planning control, caused by, for example, inaccurate forecasting, and mitigation and contingency risks, which will occur if your business does not have a contingency plan to absorb the effects of the changes that are going on around you as well. So this is similar to the point that I made over climate. There are a number of tools out there that analyze trends, and they use predictive, prescriptive analytics, and they do so using historical data. Where you've got a situation involving rapidly evolving change, that data will change quickly also, and it may be that your existing model is therefore misleading in terms of rapidly evolving change. So that's just a little caveat that I thought would be useful to point out. The risk management strategies for supply chain issues, it's really difficult, and it's this globalization interconnectedness of things. So there's a framework that you can think of: prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. It's just a means of categorizing in a hierarchy the kind of resilience measures that you can take. Stockpiling might be one for prevention. Preparedness, developing contingency plans in case of an emergency. The response is the execution of those emergency plans, so testing them. And the recovery is where you want to be when you come out of the event. It's the resumption of the operational activities following some kind of stress test. Any risk to your business, whether it's climate or from other events, should be evaluated and mitigated and identified through this process of risk assessment. It is this brainstorming activity, getting a group of clever people sitting around a table and chewing the fat over what it is that can go wrong. Where the change is quick, that process is more difficult, but it is more important as well. As I was putting some of these slides together, back on the 27th of April, that was yesterday, wasn't it? Russian stops natural gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria and extends the stoppage of its fertilizer exports. This has significant consequences for energy industry and agriculture as well. If fertilizer exports are stopped, people have to get on with it. We still have to grow stuff. That means raw materials are going to come from somewhere else, and where they come from might not be as good, might be better, but either way, you need to do some form of evaluation of what that change means for your business. And it only happened yesterday, so it's worth thinking about quickly. So the supply chain and climate change proved two principal challenges. Raw materials and other commodities, we've got the rare earth metals, got oil and gas, and means of transport and routes are all affected, as well as others, but they're all important in their own right. Given the complexity of a globalized market, that means that these knock-on effects can, and they will affect organizations who might consider themselves immune from the direct effects. It will be your suppliers, it'll be your customers, it might be the transport company who suffer, and those have the knock-on effects for you. So you need to look at your third-party vulnerabilities almost as much as you need to look at your own. So, it's coming up for the last sort of 5 minutes or so, and this is the management of change. So it's how you deal with it and what the implications are. In particular, and this in particular for the client I mentioned earlier, these changes actually affected their basis of safety as well. So where you introduce a change as the result of a risk assessment that you have done on climate change or on geopolitical change, you need to assess those under an appropriately rigorous, as I've termed it, that's brilliant actually, I like that, appropriately rigorous change management system. The implications of the change, the consequences that are separate from the reason that the change was introduced. That's the key thing. They must be adequately evaluated, they must be managed, and the risk must be appropriately mitigated. Otherwise, you may well find yourself in breach of the law, and a change management system should be used to do this for you. So this is my former client. We had a client who changed a raw material supply. They provided the same compound, but it had a different particle. The average particle size was different. That has real-world implications. It didn't affect their processing, which is probably why they didn't pay too much attention to it. But the compound was, in this case, combustible. And the fact that the particle size had changed, it considerably altered the flammable and explosive properties, and therefore it changed the basis of safety. The risk assessment associated with disease was no longer valid because they weren't looking at the right material anymore. It was right from the processing point of view, but it wasn't right from the point of view of their basis of safety. So your management of change system should be capable of identifying this potential and identify when it is necessary to put in some form of mitigation. So before specific mitigations can be introduced, you need to characterize your material, which in this case required them to undertake adequate testing to determine whether there was a material change to their basis of safety. So the results of that testing informed the assessment, and therefore measures could be identified that could be put in place in order to bring the process back to be in a safe state and fulfill the company's requirements of the UK law and the DSIR as well. But they would not have known otherwise without that testing. They would have gone on. They did have a small incident, and that was what prompted them to do testing eventually. So again, from the point of view of DSIR, A basis of safety is made up of all these things: equipment, procedures, deviations, human factors, material properties, and the level of risk that you're aiming for. Any change that you've introduced as a result of anything going on within the world that affects those things is going to affect your basis of safety, and therefore it needs to be something that you consider and look at to maintain your safe performance. So that brings us more or less up to the end. Just summarize on this last slide. We've had climate change, rapidly evolving situations around the world. Organizations will have to implement changes of their own in order to mitigate those, to maintain the business continuity, to maintain the productivity, and to make sure that there are no major accidents as a result of those. Those changes are driven by the risk assessment that goes alongside climate, the risk assessment that goes alongside geopolitical implications. Those changes are implemented through your change management system. You have to have a means of managing those effectively. And your change management system must identify what additional mitigations must be put in place to the current basis of safety under which you operate. It's change within change within change, which takes me back to the very first slide. Change begets change. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. I always enjoy these anyway, but I'm pleased we had so many attendees. If you require any further information, please feel free to contact Sam Ayres at Sigma-HSE. He'll be happy to put you right, but otherwise, we've got a bank holiday coming up in the UK this weekend, so that's something to look forward to. I hope you all enjoy it. But otherwise, thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Thank you.